se agudizan los sentidos y la creatividad alcanza metas inimaginables. Un lugar donde se revive la historia y se rompen las barreras para hacer ciencia. Donde la poesía se convierte en movimiento y las ideas empiezan a tomar forma. Un lugar donde la naturaleza, la tecnología y las personas se conjugan y te hacen único para toda tu vida. En donde se forman líderes visionarios, personas que transforman vidas mediante la educación. Un lugar desde donde se mira el pasado con gratitud y el futuro como un reto. Existe un lugar en el Caribe colombiano en donde te acompañamos a escribir tu historia. Conócenos. Universidad del Norte.
Conoce la maestría en educación de la Universidad del Norte y accede a docentes con formación internacional y doctoral, misiones académicas, cotutorías internacionales, asignaturas blended, tesis focalizadas en nuestros 10 énfasis aprobados por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional y homologable un año con el doctorado. Estudia la maestría en educación en la Universidad del Norte. Conoce la maestría virtual en educación mediada por TIC de la Universidad del Norte, con flexibilidad para la formación en todas las áreas disciplinares. Fomenta el desarrollo de habilidades y competencias para el diseño de ambientes de aprendizaje presenciales enriquecidos con TIC desde una práctica pedagógica reflexiva, así como desde los diferentes escenarios de intervención de los participantes, con currículo pertinente a la formación global y local. Estudia la maestría virtual en educación mediada por TIC en Uninorte. Conoce la primera maestría en Pedagogía Social de Latinoamérica totalmente virtual de la Universidad del Norte. Comparte experiencias con docentes y estudiantes de distintas universidades del mundo. Accede a amplios recursos digitales y aprende lineamientos para la intervención en diversos grupos poblacionales y múltiples contextos de acción socioeducativa. Estudia la maestría en Pedagogía Social e Intervención Educativa en Contextos Sociales en Uninorte. Conoce el doctorado en Educación de la Universidad del Norte y fórmate en investigación de alto nivel. Obtén una experiencia de pasantía internacional y accede a redes de investigación con docentes de universidades nacionales e internacionales. Estudia el doctorado en Educación en la Universidad del Norte.
Señoras y señores, muy buenas tardes. Le damos la más cordial bienvenida y nos complace contar con la presencia de todos ustedes al evento organizado por el Instituto de Estudios en Educación bajo el liderazgo de la Maestría en Educación de la Universidad del Norte y la Asociación Latinoamericana de Investigación de Métodos Mixtos. Este evento ha sido organizado para conmemorar no solo los 30 años de existencia de nuestro programa académico, sino festejar el cúmulo de éxitos que han logrado nuestros estudiantes, egresados, tutores y docentes a lo largo de estos años. La crisis sanitaria a nivel mundial ha puesto en evidencia la necesidad de transformarnos y reinventarnos como sociedad. De allí, la necesidad de seguir formando líderes e investigadores para estos tiempos retadores. Este espacio forma parte de la celebración de los 30 años de la Maestría en Educación de la Universidad del Norte. Desde el 14 de noviembre hasta el 5 de diciembre realizaremos conferencias con expertos internacionales en las diferentes áreas de nuestros 10 énfasis. Mañana haremos el lanzamiento del segundo tomo del libro Investigación Educativa desde el Caribe colombiano, edición especial 30 años de la Maestría en Educación, y cerramos con nuestra feria de investigación de estudiantes y egresados. Hoy es un honor contar en este espacio con el líder mundial en metodología de la investigación, el Dr. John Creswell, con su conferencia inaugural, Fundamentos y Buenas Prácticas en Métodos Mixtos. Ahora hablaré un poco sobre el Dr. Creswell. El Dr. Creswell es fundador y académico de renombre mundial en métodos mixtos. Ha escrito numerosos artículos en revistas de impacto y más de 28 libros sobre investigación de métodos mixtos, métodos de investigación e investigación cualitativa de prestigiosas editoriales como Sage Publication y Merrill Education, con más de 6.555 citas reportadas en el ISE Web of Science y un total acumulado de 349.127 citas en Google Scholar. De sus 4 principales publicaciones en el año 2018, su libro Qualitative Inquiry and Research Design ganó el prestigioso premio Textbooks and Academic Authors Association de McGriffey Longevity Award. Actualmente es profesor adjunto de la Universidad de Michigan, donde también ejerce como codirector y senior professor adjunto de la Universidad de Michigan. Michigan Methods Program. La Universidad de Michigan ocupa el puesto número 22 en el ranking de Shanghai, y el Dr. Creswell es coeditor, fundador del Journal of Mixed Methods Research, revista indexada en ISE Q1 y rankeado número 10 de 108 en Ciencias Sociales Interdisciplinares en ISI GCR. Ha sido Visiting Scholar de Harvard University en 2003 y recibió un doctorado honorario en la Universidad de Pepperdine en 2014. En 2014-2015 se desempeñó como presidente de la Mixed Methods International Research Association. Preside en este acto el doctor José Alfredo Aparicio, director del Instituto de Estudios en Educación IES, la doctora Elsa Lucía Escalante Barrios, coordinadora académica de la maestría en educación, y saludamos de manera muy especial a nuestros estudiantes, egresados, docentes y tutores que nos acompañan el día de hoy. Para este evento tenemos una función de traducción simultánea para todas las personas que se encuentran en Zoom. Pronto podrán ver la diapositiva donde dice cómo ingresar a esta opción. Como pueden verla, deben tener ahora mismo habilitada interpretación y escoger el lenguaje que más les interese. No siendo más, quiero darle la palabra a nuestra coordinadora académica de la maestría en educación, la doctora Elsa Escalante.
Buenas tardes, gracias Jules. Bueno, primero que todo, muchas gracias al director del IES, el doctor José Alfredo Aparicio, y a nuestro invitado internacional, el doctor John Creswell. Muchísimas gracias también a nuestro equipo de la maestría y a nuestra comunidad educativa por hacer esto posible, y sobre todo a nuestro aliado en esta organización de este momento histórico para Latinoamérica y la comunidad global, como lo es ALIM, la Asociación Latinoamericana de Investigación en Métodos Mixtos, quien se unió con nosotros y creamos este espacio para ustedes. Para mí realmente es un placer moderar este espacio, porque estamos viviendo 2 momentos icónicos. El primero para la maestría en educación, porque en este momento va a cumplir o está cumpliendo 30 años de existencia. 30 años de recorrido académico formando líderes para Colombia y para Latinoamérica. Y el otro hito es que esta es el primer evento que hace la Asociación Latinoamericana de Métodos Mixtos para Latinoamérica, con el fin de promover esta comunidad investigativa en nuestra región, en español, ¿verdad? Y sobre todo para poder crear estos escenarios de trabajo colectivo, de investigación entre nosotros los latinoamericanos y también con el resto del mundo. En nuestro contexto, ahora mismo estamos viviendo momentos retadores. El 2020 nos ha cogido desprevenidos, pero hay algo que realmente es fundamental y es que la investigación es clave. Eso ha quedado totalmente claro para todos. Por eso es que nuestra maestría en educación se ha reinventado y ha generado estos espacios para nuestros estudiantes y docentes y ha sido muy consciente en que ahora mismo no podemos limitarnos a nuestra parte local, sino que tenemos que trabajar en comunidad. Entonces, la maestría se ha reinventado y ha generado clases, espacios, aulas globales, tal como lo es este espacio que tenemos con todos ustedes, pero también a través de pasantías de investigación tenemos profesores que gracias a esta pandemia se han vinculado, profesores de diferentes regiones, de Estados Unidos, de Canadá, de España, de Brasil, que forman parte de nuestro programa. Entonces, esta de hecho es una oportunidad para invitar a toda la comunidad que está aquí en este espacio para ser parte de nuestro programa de maestría en educación a través de pasantías, a través de profesores visitantes, de investigaciones conjuntas. Entonces, que sea esta también una gran oportunidad para extenderle la invitación. Por otro lado, está la Asociación Latinoamericana de Investigación en Métodos Mixtos, que es la primera asociación profesional de habla hispana para el fomento del desarrollo de la comunidad científica enfocado en los métodos mixtos. Se creó en el 2019 y ha venido poco a poco generando diferentes acciones, por ejemplo, acercamientos con universidades, ya hemos tenido en Paraguay, en Chile, y pues este espacio también es para ello, para invitar a toda la comunidad latinoamericana y global a ser parte de esta asociación. Entonces, definitivamente son dos momentos icónicos y qué mejor forma de celebrar este momento que con un grande, una leyenda de la investigación como lo es el doctor John Creswell. Con mucha alegría les informamos que hemos alcanzado 4.500 inscritos a esta conferencia inaugural. Les damos la bienvenida a todos los investigadores de Colombia, Venezuela, Perú, Ecuador, Argentina, Chile, Paraguay, Bolivia, Costa Rica, Honduras, México, Estados Unidos, India, Malasia, Filipinas, Indonesia, Australia, Nigeria, Pakistán, Emiratos Árabes, Nepal. O sea, tengo muchísimos otros países que están aquí con nosotros viviendo este momento tan especial. Entonces, pues para mí es un placer tener a este invitado, el doctor John Creswell, que ya, pues Jules nos ha hecho todo su recorrido y definitivamente es un privilegio para nosotros contar con él y para mí a nivel personal es también un momento muy especial, fue mi profesor y creo que es un momento en el que todos los profes que estamos aquí tenemos que dejar esa huella y seguir trabajando con nuestros estudiantes y yo creo que eso es algo muy emotivo y la emoción es que mueve la educación y mueve la investigación. Ahora, como este espacio no solamente en español, sino que también tenemos, como dije, algunos investigadores a nivel internacional, entonces voy a hacer una pequeña introducción también para nuestra comunidad que no habla el español. Entonces, many thanks to the director of IES, José Alfredo Aparicio, and to our special international guest, Dr. John Creswell. So for us, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for being part of this iconic and historic conference. So for us, it's a very special opportunity. So welcome, and this is your audience. Thank you very much.
Greetings, everyone. Greetings, everyone. And Professor Elsa, gracias, and Sergi from Spain, gracias for hosting me and letting me be part of this wonderful event, an historic event. I'm speaking to you from Osaka, Japan, halfway around the world. I live in Osaka, and then we also live in Honolulu. But as you know, I'm the senior research scientist at the Michigan Mixed Methods Research Program. And I work with them on projects, and I work with them on workshops. And it's just a delight to be here. And hopefully you will pick up some new ideas about mixed methods research. I'm going to talk about the foundations and some of the best practices of mixed methods research. And, so this presentation will be maybe 50 minutes or 45 or 55 minutes long. And then there'll be an opportunity for you to ask some questions. And Professor Elsa from Colombia will be monitoring those questions and present a few questions to me from you, the most important audience. And I'm just delighted with the turnout all over the world for this webinar. So the Latin American Mixed Methods Association has really done a good job in organizing this. I want to talk about a few thoughts about my background, make some comments about mixed methods research in Latin America, provide a short introduction to mixed methods research, and then the primary part of this presentation will be on some of the best practices to use if you're doing a mixed method study. And so I'll give reasons for each one of these practices and specific examples. So a few thoughts about my own background here. You know, I was one of the beginning, the founders of mixed methods research over 30 years ago. There were about 9 people in different countries that all came to the same conclusion that it was time to start bringing together quantitative and qualitative research. We were not in touch with each other. There were people in sociology and management, and in nursing, and in the health sciences. But it basically began about 30 years ago. And during these 30 years, I directed the Office of Mixed Methods Research at Nebraska, and I helped to found the Journal of Mixed Methods Research. And then I helped to establish the Mixed Methods International Research Association. And I have this really strong interest in international work. And so I was a Fulbright senior scholar at South Africa and Thailand. And I helped then in 2015 develop the Mixed Methods Research Program at the University of Michigan. And if you haven't gone to a workshop at Michigan, you should certainly think about it. There are about 4 or 5 workshops a year, and they are online, of course, right now during the pandemic. But the workshops are definitely worthwhile if you're doing a mixed methods project and you need to bring in some of the latest ideas. I'm also providing consulting services out of Osaka and Honolulu. I'm probably best known for some of the books that I've written. I've really written books on research methods in 3 areas. Up at the top on the left, you see my books on research design, general research design, and then educational research. And then on the right, you see my 2 books in qualitative research. A beginning book called The 30 Essential Skills, and the more advanced book, Qualitative Inquiry and Research Design. And down on the left, you see my 2 mixed methods books. The book on the right, The Concise Introduction, is the way I would recommend that you start thinking about mixed methods research. It's a short book. It can be read by an English-speaking person in 2 to 3 hours. It's very inexpensive from Sage Publication, and it really provides an orientation to mixed methods research. It's based on my lectures at Harvard that I gave in 2015. And then on the left of that is the larger book, 400-page book, Designing and Conducting Mixed Methods Research, which is more the advanced presentation of mixed methods research. And so take a look at some of these books if you can. I'm not the only person writing on mixed methods. There's probably 30 or 40 books out there on this field. I just thought I would talk a little bit about how I've been presenting around the world and how mixed methods has taken off. Of course, in England and the United States were the two places probably where it really began to get some development these 30 years ago. But I've presented in South Africa and in Europe and Germany. I was in Germany, Australia, of course, in Tokyo and in Japan. There's quite a bit of interest. There's the Japan Society for Mixed Methods Research, which has really developed rapidly in the last 2 or 3 years. A lot of interest in Thailand. I spoke in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Indonesia. There's been a lot of interest in Trinidad and Jamaica, and of course now in Latin America, South America. So you can see this is a worldwide movement of mixed methods research. And I often say it's one of the latest methodologies. So you want to think about using it in your research project. Just a few thoughts about mixed methods research in Latin America. I went into the literature, and of course, people are writing mixed method studies in South America and Latin America. I pulled out this article up on the left from Brazil on women's struggles of land rights. Then in Ecuador about research methods courses that are coming along. And in Peru, a health-related study. Then from Brazil, another study on mixed methods research and geo-referenced information. Another study on neighborhood disadvantages. I want to point out this one on the right down at the bottom. It's a mixed methods study published in the leading mixed methods journal on mixed methods in studies on women's struggles for land rights in Brazil. So I know there's quite a bit of interest in developing mixed methods research in South America and Latin America areas of the world right now. One area that has developed considerably in is the Caribbean chapter of the Mixed Methods Research Association. And I see what Professor Elsa and Professor Sergio are doing with this webinar is an introduction to the field, and it certainly can develop. Now, what happened in the Caribbean, maybe 5 years ago, it's a short period of time, Dr. Lorraine Cook at the University of the West Indies was a key individual taking the lead in developing mixed methods research. And she helped to organize international conferences that have been held in Jamaica, been held in Trinidad. She then formed an advisory committee to help advise the development of the field of mixed methods in the Caribbean chapter. Then they formally assumed chapter status in the Mixed Methods International Research Association, MMIRA. So they became a major chapter in the world. And then they started sending scholars to workshops at Michigan. And we've had their scholars as visiting professors in our Michigan Mixed Methods program. And then the latest adventure is to create a specific journal on Caribbean mixed methods research. And so they've launched that. So this is how I see South America, the Latin American orientation the Latin American Mixed Methods Association developing over time? Well, usually when I present, I give a short introduction to what is mixed methods research. Some people have been reading articles or reading books. Many people are new to this field. It is a fairly new methodology in the last 30 years. I can tell you how this methodology is developed because I've been part of this experience over the 30 years. And back in 1985 to 1990 is the founding period. As I said, different disciplines, different countries, we were all working to develop this new field as a methodology. But then the book came out in 1998 on mixed methods as a methodology from Tashikori and Tedley, and it began to pull in the field. But by 2003, we had the SAGE Handbook on Mixed Methods Research, which really began to develop the entire, there are maybe 25 chapters in this handbook. So they began to map the entire field. By 2007, we had the Journal Mixed Methods Research. So journal was the next step. And then the US federal government became involved. The National Institute of Health commissioned a panel, and I was on that panel to come up with the best practices of mixed methods research in 2011. And then the association was formed in 2013. And then from this international association, they had an international meeting every other year, but on the off years, they would have regional conferences. Tokyo, New Zealand, Trinidad, South America, or South Africa, South Africa. Then the federal government also became interested in developing some standards of using mixed methods research in the health sciences. So the National Institute of Health in America put together a task force. It actually started in 2011. And then we now have professional associations involved in coming up with standards like the American Psychological Association. So you can see here with my boxes at the bottom of this slide, this is how a methodology gets developed. People write books, they create a journal, there's federal involvement, funding, an international association, a training program is developed, and then some standards. And so I think that in Latin America, the Latin American Association for Mixed Method Research, you may follow a similar path as this. Well, what is mixed methods research? And here's a very simple model to illustrate it. Mixed methods research is if you have an opportunity to collect both quantitative data and qualitative data. For example, conduct a survey and then also collect interviews. And then you bring these two databases together. As a man in South Africa once said to me, he said, "This is like two hands coming together, John, to form a stronger bond." So we're going to bring these two databases together. And from this bringing together, we're going to gain insight beyond just what we learn from analyzing our quantitative or qualitative data. This is what mixed methods is. And this slide kind of shows my definition of mixed methods research. You need to start by gathering quantitative and qualitative data to answer both quantitative and qualitative research questions. And then you select a mixed methods design, which is a set of procedures for organizing your questions, your data collection, your data analysis, interpretation. And what you then do is you bring the two databases together. The term is integration, integrating the data in the design. There's different ways to integrate that I'm going to talk about. And then from that integration, we draw conclusions or inferences. And we may use what's called a joint display table that I'm going to explain to look at what we conclude from bringing these two databases together. And then we also draw from these inferences insight beyond what we learned from just our quantitative and qualitative data. So as my colleague at Michigan, Professor Mike Fetter says, 1 + 1 = 3. Quantitative plus qualitative equals 3. It's more than just 2. You have added insight. And to understand that definition, it's helpful to know how I'm looking at these two databases. Some people say quantitative is numbers and qualitative is stories. And I think that works a little bit, but I see quantitative as close-ended, where you ask a question and have responses. And the close-ended quantitative could be on instruments, checklists, document data. Qualitative is more open-ended, where you ask a general question and listen to the participant give a response through interviews, or you can observe, or documents, or even the many social media possibilities now are part of qualitative data, using text messages or Facebook posts or website information. So we have this array of social media qualitative data. So the idea is to bring these two databases together in a design. So this is a design of an explanatory sequential project. If you look down at the left, we're going to start with a research question, and we're then going to collect and analyze quantitative data. We might collect survey information, looking at the health issue of cholesterol. We're going to have a theory that helps us form this survey. And then we're going to collect and analyze qualitative data as a follow-up. Now, doing a survey is important, but we only get statistical results. So let's follow up qualitatively with some interviews with some patients and dive into the results in more detail to get the personal perspectives, and then finally to make an interpretation. So you see, a design consists of these parts. We've got a question, we've got data collection, we've got theory, we've got interpretation. That's what I mean by a mixed methods design. Now, integration means what we're going to do is bring these two databases together. There's different ways we can do this. We can actually merge them together, put them together in a single table. Or we can do them sequentially, which is the second one here. We can start with that survey, just as I showed you, and follow up with some interviews, and use the qualitative interviews to help explain the survey results. Or we might integrate by starting qualitatively and then following up quantitatively. So you see, it starts differently. In this second one, we start quantitatively, and in the third, we start qualitatively. So these are some ways in which we can integrate, bring the two databases together. And as I said, we draw inferences from combining these two databases. So an example would be, let's put together a table that has our quantitative scores on the left, and then followed up by qualitative themes, and then our interpretation in the third column. This is called a joint display table. I'm going to go into that in a little more detail. But we can draw inferences. How did the people who scored high respond to the themes differently than the people who scored low? So this is a joint display table. Well, before you start, you need to think about some basic questions here. You do need some skills in both quantitative and qualitative research. And if you are strong in qualitative research, then find someone that is strong in quantitative to team with. You have to be able to collect both forms of data. I think you need to read a little bit about mixed methods. You need to read an introduction to mixed methods research, or one of the many books, or even look at one of those mixed methods articles in South America, in Brazil and Ecuador and Peru and other places that I've mentioned. Reading some books and journal articles is very, very important to understand this. You also need a question that maybe is best answered by both collecting open-ended qualitative data as well as closed-ended quantitative data, where collecting one of them would not give you as complete a picture as both together. And this is a good sophisticated research approach. It will take time and resources, but it's well worth the effort. And you'll be positioning yourself for using the latest research methodology approach that's available in the social and health sciences. Now I want to turn to 10 best practices for you to think about including in your mixed method study. The first 6 I'm going to go over in some detail. And the last 4 I will go over briefly, but you'll be aware of these. And really, I've been thinking about putting together this list of best practices for several years. I remember back in the 1990s, I had a study on structural equation modeling, and I went to a specialist. And he said, well, John, this is a good study, but you're missing some of the best practices of structural equation modeling. And he told me what those were, and I put them in my article, and then the article was published. So I think it's important to bring into your research some of the latest, most advanced practices in mixed methods research to make it sophisticated. Well, as I said, I've been thinking about coming up with a short list of best practices for some time. And I think this really came home to me when I began working, you see it up here at the left, on the NIH Best Practices of Mixed Methods in the Health Sciences. Our committee first met in 2011, and then this list has been updated. But this is the National Institute of Health guidance on what constitutes a good mixed methods project. And there's a table in this guide. It's if you were to Google this, NIH Best Practices of Mixed Methods in Health Sciences, you'll find this report because it was placed up on a website and it became so popular. Within 2 weeks in 2011, after we posted it, there were over 20,000 hits on this website. And it's become one of the most popular websites for the Office of Behavioral and Social Sciences at NIH. And we have a table, actually a checklist at the end of this report of the best practices to include if you're writing an application to NIH for funding, or if you're reviewing. So this is a very important step towards coming up with some of the best practices. Then more recently, the American Psychological Association has developed standards for mixed methods research. And you see the citation here on the left, and on the right, our journal article in the American Psychologist. You can find this on the internet. This is our report talking about the best practices for qualitative and mixed methods research. And there's a table in this report specifically for mixed methods research that talks about some of the standards that should be used when you put together a journal article for an American Psychological Association journal. There are over 400 journals sponsored by APA. And if you've had a chance to look at the publication manual, the style manual, the most recent edition, I believe it's the 7th edition, you will see now a discussion about the standards in mixed methods research. This is a historic development because throughout the years, the publication style manual has had nothing on qualitative and mixed methods research. And now there's a complete section on standards. So this is going out around the world and really helping to promote the use of mixed methods research. I've also been informed by the writings of Sergi and Jose from Spain and their articles that have been published recently, 2017 and 2019, on standards of quality in mixed methods research. And they have some helpful lists in their publications as well as to what you might include in your mixed methods study. So these 3 sources of information have been extremely instrumental in helping me to think about the practices that I would encourage you to use in your mixed methods project. So I divided these 10 practices into 2 categories. First of all, must-see practices. These are ones that I think are really essential to put into your mixed methods project. And then below those, that's the first 6. Then the last 4, I call these optional but important practices. Think about including the optional practices as well, and you'll have a very rigorous mixed methods sophisticated project worthy of publication in an international journal. So on these first must-see practices, first of all, name your mixed methods design. Tell me the name of the mixed methods procedures, your design that you're using in your study. I think this is very important. Now, you could turn to many of the books on mixed methods research to get the names that are being used today. In my book with Plano Clark, we have chapter 3, and we give the names of 3 core designs: convergent, explanatory sequential design, and exploratory sequential design. I'm going to explain those in just a minute. And then these core designs are embedded or included within complex procedures or frameworks. So, for example, chapter 4 talks about the complex designs, the mixed methods, intervention or experimental design, comparative case study design, evaluation design, participatory action research design. So here are some names that you could use for your project in terms of designs. And maybe to help you think about these design possibilities, I put together this little table of a diagram of the 3 core designs. In this convergent design, what we're going to do here is we're going to take our qualitative data and our quantitative data. We're actually going to merge it, bring it together in a table so that we can compare what we learn from our open-ended qualitative data and our closed-ended quantitative data. A convergent design, very popular. The second one is an explanatory sequential design. This is a design where we're going to start by gathering quantitative data, on instruments or documents or observations. And then we're going to follow it up sequentially with gathering qualitative data. Now we use this design really to understand the quantitative results in more depth. The quantitative results are going to give us significant differences, p-values, confidence intervals, effect sizes, but we really don't know why these relationships might exist. And so we're going to explain them by gathering qualitative data as a follow-up. I say this explanatory sequential design is a very, very popular graduate student research design, especially in America and other places around the world. The third design is an exploratory sequential design. We're going to explore first by gathering qualitative data. And then we're going to build, say, a survey instrument or experimental procedures, or maybe even a website that then we test out quantitatively in the final phase. Now, what this means is that the survey instrument, shall we say, is going to be sensitive to the population and the sample we're studying, because we begin by gathering qualitative data to understand the problem. Now, this design is very popular internationally in global research. You know, my colleagues at Harvard were using this design to study issues of families in North Africa, where they would first go in and gather qualitative community interviews and then redesign the Western instruments to best fit the population. I often say, you know, you just can't drop into Rwanda a Western depression instrument. No, you need to start first and talk to people about how they view depression and then modify your instrument. That's the same in Japan too. We can't just drop in some of the Western instruments into Japan. We need to think about how people respond personally to issues and then revise our instruments. So these are the three core designs. Now, moving to those complex designs, what we're going to do is we're going to put those core designs into a larger process or framework, such as an experiment. So in an experiment, which you see in the box in the center here, we might start with some qualitative interviews before the experiment. We're going to embed an exploratory sequential core design into the experiment. Or we might do an experiment where, while the experiment is running, we're gathering qualitative data as well. We're going to embed a convergent design in the experiment. Or a really popular approach in health sciences these days is to gather qualitative data after the experiment or intervention to help explain those results. You know, why did the treatment work? To explain the quantitative results in more detail. So this is embedding an explanatory sequential design. So this is what I mean by a complex design. What we're doing is we're embedding a core design. We're putting a core design within a larger framework. I want to give you more examples of this in a moment. Well, you can see my second point, best practice, is to have a diagram of your procedures. And you can see that I've been illustrating mixed methods by using some diagrams here. It simplifies the complex procedures used in mixed methods research so that the project can be easily understood. And this idea came forward maybe 15 years ago as federal US agencies were reviewing applications. And they said, John, this is complex, but wouldn't it be helpful to have a diagram of our procedures? I began thinking about, you know, how would I draw a picture, a diagram of the procedures? I'm going to give you a couple of illustrations here. First, with these core designs. This first one is a convergent design. So I'm going to put on a piece of paper, and I can draw this in PowerPoint or in Word or in a drawing software program. my quantitative and qualitative data. That's the two core elements. And in a convergent design, I'm going to bring these two databases together. One thing that's helpful is to have research questions or aims on each part in this diagram. So my quantitative aim might be like, I'm doing a study of aging to explain the determinants, what explains aging through a survey. And then aim 2 would be my qualitative aim, to explore the personal experiences with aging. And aim 3, to develop a complex understanding, which is really my mixed methods aim. So this is a convergent mixed method design diagram. And I can also put onto this diagram a timeline of when I'm going to be collecting and analyzing this data. This is really helpful, not only to have a diagram for a journal article, an application for funding, to present to your graduate committee if you're doing a mixed methods master's thesis or dissertation. I want to show you another diagram here. This is going to be a diagram of an explanatory sequential design. Remember that design is where I start quantitatively and then follow up with qualitative data. So I'm going to connect these two databases, and I'm going to use the qualitative to explain the quantitative results. Again, I can put quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods aims above each one of the parts of this. And so this is a diagram of an explanatory sequential mixed method design. I've already shown you that design several times. And then we can also have a timeline at the bottom. Now, what you're finding in the publications in mixed methods research are many diagrams of the designs. In fact, it's become a rather standard practice in the mixed methods field. You need a diagram. Now, if you're doing a complex design, let's say you're putting a core design into a participatory action research study, or an experimental study or evaluation project. Here are the steps in drawing this design. First, list the steps in your process. What are the steps in the experiment or the evaluation? Identify in those steps where you can collect both quantitative and qualitative data. And then these places where you can collect both forms of data, they become an opportunity for you to have a core mixed methods design. Identify the type of core design. Well, let me show you a picture here. A participatory action research study. So that's a study basically where you're doing a project in the community and you involve the community members in helping you to design the various aspects of your project. So drawing a diagram, a mixed methods diagram of this procedure, first of all, this is drawn from Ivan Kova's book on action research. And she talks about the steps in conducting a participatory action research study: diagnosing the environment, reconnaissance, planning, acting, evaluation, and monitoring. Okay, this is the first step. List your steps in the process that you're using. In this case, participatory action research. Then look at the steps where you have an opportunity to collect both quantitative and qualitative data. Like right here in the reconnaissance stage, you have that opportunity. So this could be a core design, could be a convergent core design. Look at other boxes. Over here, we have an opportunity to collect and analyze both quantitative and qualitative data. So this gives us the opportunity to have another core design. So what we're doing is we are embedding or including within a larger process mixed methods research. This is the complex mixed methods design for a participatory action research study. Okay, now let me move on to the third one here. Advance a rationale for why you're using mixed methods research. You know, mixed methods is still new and people need to understand it, need to understand why you're using it. I think the reasons that you can write into your project relate to the specific project and a little bit about yourself. So about the project, one reason using mixed methods is neither quantitative research or qualitative alone is really sufficient to adequately address the research problem. And by combining these two databases, you can get more insight into the problem beyond the quantitative and qualitative results. You could use these two rationales in your project. Feel free to borrow exactly what I've said here. Now, in terms of other reasons for wanting to use mixed methods research, well, I see it as one of the latest, most recent methodologies that, as you can see, is caught on around the world. And so when you do your research, you're using one of the latest procedures in the social and health sciences. Perhaps you've read books and articles on mixed methods research, so you have a foundation in conducting this type of a study. You have experiences. And also, your advisor or colleagues are supportive of your use of mixed methods research, or your field is supportive of mixed methods research. So here you have 5 different rationales that you can put into your project. It's important to tell a reader why you're using mixed methods research. Integration. You saw in those steps how integration was an important part. We're putting the two databases together. It's a central concept. You need to use that word, integration, and actually have some statements about how integration was accomplished. So for example, if you have a convergent design, remember this is where we're bringing quantitative and qualitative data together to compare the data, to validate the data, to look for differences in how people talk about a topic quantitatively and qualitatively. Integration occurs at this stage where we're actually merging the two databases. In that explanatory sequential design, what we're doing, and integration is, to me, is where does the quantitative and qualitative data actually connect or bump up against each other? In the explanatory sequential design, our integration resides right here. We gather quantitative data, and then we follow up with qualitative. We're integrating the two databases. We need to talk about this. And then exploratory sequential design, integration. You know, we start qualitatively and collect qualitative data, and then we build some type of a quantitative measurement assessment, like a survey or experimental activities or even new variables. The integration is between the quantitative results and the design of a quantitative assessment instrument or activities. So integration lies right here between these 2 points. You can say in your project, I'm going to first collect qualitative data, analyze the results, come up with themes, and then use the themes to design a survey that is grounded in the views of participants, that is culturally adapted and sensitive to the population. You see, I just gave an integration statement for an exploratory sequential design. that you could use. And these complex designs, integration occurs where you put the quantitative and qualitative together. I showed you in that participatory action research project the circle of steps, and there were places where both quantitative and qualitative were being combined. So you're integrating at specific steps in your complex process. This is an example of a program evaluation. Next one, which is really important. From the integration, draw conclusions about what not only the quantitative results tell us in your study and your qualitative results, but what does the integration tell us? What are the new conclusions that we can come from merging these two databases? We call these meta inferences, because there are inferences beyond the quantitative and qualitative inferences. They're meta inferences. So I put together a little diagram here of the process. So you analyze both the quantitative and qualitative data within a design. You analyze and collect, put it within a design. Then you represent the results in a joint display. Now this is going to be a place where we can actually see the integration. And then from this joint display, we draw meta inferences. And then finally indicate the value of these meta inferences for using mixed methods research. And I've spoken a little bit about a joint display. Well, here's an example of one for convergent design. You see, what I've done here is I've put together a table that organizes both the qualitative themes up at the top on the horizontal axis and the quantitative scores on the vertical axis. And then within the cells, I can put quotes or I can put numbers. And then I have a column for inferences where I can draw insight across rows, or I can draw inferences across columns. For example, I could take theme 1 and see how people who score high, medium, and low responded differently to theme 1, draw an inference, and gain insight as to how that would help me understand the problem better. So joint displays are very popular. There's some great articles by Tim Gutterman, my colleague at Michigan, on joint displays. And you're seeing more and more of these joint displays reported in the mixed methods literature. The joint display is a way to present and analyze the integration of the two databases. And in fact, Dr. Federer's book from Michigan, the Mixed Methods Research Workbook, talks about different integration techniques and how some strategies to address them. You can look for, does the quantitative and qualitative data complement each other? Does it help expand? There's an entire chapter on using joint displays and how you actually draw conclusions from a table like I've just shown you. And finally, once you've got these meta inferences, talk about in your study the value that mixed methods adds. You can understand your problem at a deeper level. You can see that maybe the quantitative or qualitative by themselves are insufficient. Collecting both forms of data are important. Finally, the sixth one, make your philosophical position known. We bring a philosophical position to all of our research. This is especially important in the social sciences. I go back to a book by Thomas Kuhn, where he talked about identifying your philosophy or worldview for your research. So I suggest that you make your philosophy or worldview specific in your research project. And your worldview or your philosophy is based upon, according to Kuhn, your training and your experiences. You know, you're trained in a certain way as a psychologist, and you have experiences working as a psychologist. This shapes how you look at problems, what methods to use, what conclusions to draw, how you publish your work. This then shapes your worldview. And there are various articles on the different components of a worldview, like reality and values and how you write up a study. And then put into your article, your mixed method study, a discussion about the personal worldview that you bring to your project. You know, I do think that nurses, for example, are shaped by their training and their experiences to do certain types of research. Psychologists are trained differently. Educators are trained differently. It's important to have a worldview. And I listed on this slide just some of the possible worldviews that you may have heard about: post-positivist, constructivist, participatory, critical theory, pragmatic. And I wonder, in the Latin American context, what are the worldviews? Dialectic, where there are different possibilities? Is it pro-American in your orientation? A collectivity? I'd like to see an article written about Latin American worldviews used in your research, and how these worldviews are formed, and how they're actually written into projects. Okay, those are the, you know, the major best practices I'd recommend. And now I'm going to turn to a few optional practices. I'm going to briefly go through these and just introduce them to you. Many people today, especially in the health sciences, are putting together what's called a planning table or an implementation matrix. And this table is really a table that includes mixed methods, but other parts of the study. For example, in a project, we have study aims or questions, data collection, data analysis, outcomes, integration. Put these various components together in one table to give a person an overall view of your project. Very popular in the health sciences today. So this is a project for my daughter's study of unidentified immigrants in the Houston area. She's a Robert Wood Johnson Fellow. She's a clinical social worker, but she put together this table for her research team. The different 4 phases of the project, the participants at each phase, the intent of each phase, the data sources, and the key research questions. And basically, she's doing an exploratory sequential design, exploring first with a needs assessment, developing a survey instrument, and then using that in training. So once her team saw this diagram linking together the different parts of her project, quantitative and qualitative, then they could understand her project. So think about this type of an implementation matrix. And you can go to the best practices guidelines from NIH and see several examples of these planning matrices that have been used. Another recommended would, think in terms of quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods aims or research questions. I often say in mixed methods research, we need to separate our quantitative and qualitative. We have questions for each. And then we also have a question that addresses the integration of our project, how we're integrating the data. That's the mixed methods question. So this idea came forward from the NIH best practice guidelines, that when writing mixed methods, have a quantitative aim to determine what you'll learn from your quantitative data collection analysis, a qualitative from your qualitative, and then a mixed methods to determine what we'll learn from our integration. What question are we trying to answer with our integration? So here's some examples of mixed methods, aims that can be used in a study for the core designs. You know, in a convergent design, we're going to compare the qualitative interviews, and I use an example here of elderly self-esteem, the interviews with the survey about their self-esteem. We're going to compare those two results. That's a mixed methods aim for convergent design. In the explanatory sequential design, we're going to explain the quantitative results about self-esteem with qualitative focus groups, explanatory sequential design. And then in exploratory, we're going to explore self-esteem for the elderly. In other words, to understand their viewpoint. Then we're going to develop a survey based on their interviews and then administer the contextualize the context-specific survey instrument. So there we have 3 aims. Number 9, I've got just 2 more here. It's useful to have a conceptual framework or a theory in your design. And this theory can inform the quantitative, the qualitative, or both the quantitative and qualitative. And already I showed you this explanatory sequential design where the theory of behavioral change informed the development of the survey. And this is a project from one of my colleagues at Harvard where she had one framework, one conceptual theory that was used for both the quantitative and the qualitative phases of the project. And then the final one I want to share with you is a data table. If you're going to bring these 2 databases together, it's helpful to separate them first. And just put together a table that lists your quantitative sources of data. And this is actually from my wife's Japanese study, mixed method study, looking at behavioral community support program in the area of autism disorder, autism spectrum disorder, ASD. But she had a table much like this, quantitative sources of data and qualitative sources of data. So be very specific about the types of data that you're then going to integrate or bring together. Okay, so these are the 10 practices. I've spoken for about an hour here. These first 6 are extremely important. We're going to be putting together some webinars on mixed methods research, and I may be presenting these from Hawaii in the spring. So you could go to my website, johnwcreswell.com, and see what webinars are coming on mixed methods research. These are going to be very short and inexpensive and perhaps useful webinars. So as I conclude, I wipe my brow here. What fun. So I've really enjoyed making this presentation. Thank you. Okay, back to Professor Elsa. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, I think it has been awesome, wonderful. I don't have words to express the feeling, and I would like to share with you that there are many participants expressing their feelings. They are so excited to have you here, and it's very nice. We have 1,000 people here in Zoom, and we have more than 1,000 also in YouTube. So and it has been definitely a historic and iconic event. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's my privilege to be part of this.
Yeah, you are part of our history. So thank you very much for being part here. So we have some questions. So the very first question that and the Latin American community would like to know is, it will be like, let me see, what from your experience creating a networking and research community, what would be the possible challenges that our Latin America research community would face if they want to promote the mixed methods research? So now we have an increasing number of people who are working in mixed methods, who are believing in mixed method research. So what would be the challenges, and what would be your recommendations for the next step for Latin America?
Yeah, let me speak about the challenges here. I think one challenge is to understand the basic ideas of mixed methods research. This is why I began with a very simple diagram of talking about collecting the data and then merging the data and then drawing some insights from it. I think we've become much clearer in the mixed methods field as to what this methodology is and how to present it. And we certainly have many more research studies published in journals to help people understand mixed methods research. So that's one, is to really study some of the basic articles and books on mixed methods research. Another challenge is collecting both quantitative and qualitative data is sometimes difficult. Sometimes the same participants are unwilling to complete instruments or to engage in interviews. And it's a very time-consuming process, but the core idea in mixed methods is to collect both forms of data. And then another aspect is that we've had this challenge. Another challenge is that we've had this aspect of journals opening up to mixed methods research. We have several journals that are only mixed methods research. The Journal of Mixed Methods Research, International Journal of Multiple Research Approaches, Quantity and Quality. There are several, but now other journals are opening up. And as more and more people learn about mixed methods research, I think more journals will open up. But you need to, if you want to publish your mixed methods research, the challenge is to find the appropriate journal that's open to mixed methods research. And then in terms of developing mixed methods, your Latin American Association for Mixed Methods Research. You know, I see in the future some large conferences that would bring people together with people actually reporting their research on mixed methods. I think linking with the International Mixed Methods Association, just like the Caribbean chapter did, is an important step. Also, developing your own Latin American Mixed Methods Journal, where you're publishing in Espanol the key mixed method studies so that people can see how this research is being done on very important topics unique to Latin America. These are some of the steps, and these are the steps that the Caribbean Journal followed as they developed. And they're also the steps that the Japanese chapter, Japanese Society for Mixed Methods Research has developed.
Thank you very much. This has been very useful, and I think the Latin American community definitely will work on it. We have a second question from the public. It's interesting because based on my experience as professor, this is a common question. It seems basic, yes, but it's interesting. So the question is, Dr. Creswell was talking about how mixed methods to start from capturing and analyzing qualitative and quantitative data. The question they have is, do you consider that a study where you mix the information, the data, I mean, you have the same data, but you analyze that data from different perspectives. Do you think that this could be a mixed method study, or how do you call this type of design? So you have one same data and you analyze that data from different perspectives.
Yes, this is a common question, and often it's phrased in terms of a person has a survey, and on the survey they have both close-ended quantitative questions and they have a few open-ended questions. The question is that mixed methods research? One data collection, both quantitative and qualitative. So my answer is yes, but Professor Plano Clark and I in our book, we call that mixed methods light. If you have an opportunity to collect more qualitative data, that makes a stronger study. However, I realize, and some of the medical people that I work with, they go out to the field and gather data, and they have one opportunity to gather both forms of data. And so they will have one instrument that has close-ended items and open-ended items on it. Yes, and you can probably find mixed method studies published where both forms of data are collected on one form or at one time. But open-ended questions are not very, it's not a rigorous way of collecting qualitative data. And oftentimes it's somewhat limited in the responses that you get. So I would recommend one-on-one interviews, focus groups, documents, qualitative observations, adding to that one-time data collection if you can qualitatively. So it becomes more sophisticated and rigorous. So the answer is yes, but think about the quality of your quantitative and qualitative data.
And
back to you.
Oh, thank you. And there is an interesting question that is aligned with your comments, and is about quality.
Yes.
So the big
Yes.
challenge now is what do you recommend to assess and the quality of the mixed methods study, and also what would be a good way to develop good practices in this field? So that's the point of our conference. We are talking about best practices. So the idea is best practices are associated with quality. So what we can do what we can do if we want to conduct and publish a good qualitative mixed method study.
Yes, of course. Well, to publish a good qualitative study, I would strongly recommend that you put in those first 6 practices I've mentioned. You know, have a design, have a diagram, talk specifically about integration, you know, have a conceptual framework, have a philosophy. These are the points that I think make up, if you include these in your study, I think it will be well received in journals, international journals, and by international audiences. They will see that you're using some of the latest procedures to be developed in the mixed methods field. Have a joint display that integrates your data. And you can go to the Journal of Mixed Methods Research and see examples of studies that include all of these parts. And you'll see some beautiful diagrams and some beautiful joint displays. So that's a high quality project. These first 6 at least, and then you can also think about the last 4 as possibilities to also include. Have a data table in. Put together a table that shows the implementation matrix, the planning matrix of all the parts of your study. This is helpful. These are all helpful parts. You know, when I did that article on structural equation modeling in the early 90s, I wish I had a list like this of the things that would be really important for me to include in the article. So that's how I would define quality. Back to you.
Thank you very much. So these were the 3 questions. With these 3 questions, we summarize the main ideas. There are many questions here about, for example, how to gather the qualitative and qualitative data, how to integrate. There are some questions very more focused on the procedures. So I think this is a very good recommendation. I think to go and read and enjoy all the manuscripts that you can find in the Journal of Mixed Method Research is very good and very useful, definitely.
And have fun with doing research. And have fun with doing research. You know, mixed methods is not that complicated. And it's a very simple procedure of bringing together your quantitative and qualitative data. And so don't make your study more difficult than what it needs to be. But think about including these important features that I've talked about.
Okay, Dr. Creswell, thank you very much once again. We really appreciate that you be part of this celebration, and we
thank you.
We are very happy to have you all here, people from many countries in Latin America and from other regions, and we are really happy to have you here. Thank you very much for to be part of this and celebrate our anniversary of the Master in Education. Oh, thank you, and we hopefully we're gonna have this community with ALIN, the Latin American Association, and you can participate in our activities in the Master in Education in Universidad del Norte. So thank you very much. And I think maybe we can have a picture here together, right? So
yes,
I'm gonna take that picture here. So to remember this special moment. So give me 1 second. Okay, so 1,
you got
2, and 3. Smile.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Thank you very much. So
thank you for your nice leadership on all of this. As we say in Japan, ja matane. Bye bye for now. We'll see you at the next conference in
Latin
America. Your conference.
Ciao, John.